My name is Garrett Reynolds, 34, and until last Friday, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Reynolds Electronics, the company my father built and I helped grow for 12 years. My brothers Marcus and Derek called an emergency board meeting to vote me out, dismissing me as just tech support. They celebrated with champagne while I quietly packed my office. Not knowing one crucial detail, I personally own the patents to every product they sell. Before I tell you how their faces looked when the cease and desist letters arrived Monday morning, drop a like and subscribe. Where are you watching from today? I've been fascinated with electronics since I was 6 years old. While other kids were playing with action figures, I was taking apart our TV remote, much to my mother's dismay. My father, Howard Reynolds, started Reynolds Electronics in our garage back in 1985, the year before I was born. He was a brilliant electrical engineer with a knack for solving problems others couldn't. I guess that's where I got it from. Dad and I had a special bond that my brothers never quite understood. When I was 8, he brought home a broken circuit board from work, laid it on the kitchen table with a magnifying glass and some tools, and said, "Let's see if we can figure out what's wrong with this together." We spent the entire weekend hunched over that board until we found the microscopic crack that was causing the malfunction. Mom brought us sandwiches, shaking her head but smiling. That was the moment I knew what I wanted to do with my life. My brothers were different. Marcus, 5 years older than me, was the businessman from day one. He graduated from Wharton with an MBA and never let anyone forget it. Derek, the middle child, was 2 years older than me and the marketing genius with a silver tongue who could sell ice to Eskimos, as Dad used to say. Both of them looked at the technical side of our business as necessary but somehow less important than sales and finance. "Garrett's playing with his toys again," Marcus would say whenever he walked past my workstation, even after I became an adult. Derek would laugh and add, "Thank God someone in the family knows how to actually make money from all those blinking lights." Everything changed when I was 19. The company was struggling with a new product line, signal amplifiers for cellular networks, that kept failing in field tests. Dad was about to lose a contract worth millions. I spent 3 straight days locked in the lab, redesigning the entire circuit. When I emerged, bleary-eyed but triumphant, with a working prototype, Dad didn't just thank me, he looked at me differently, with a new respect. "You just saved this company," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have a gift, son." I dropped out of MIT the following semester to join Reynolds Electronics full-time. My brothers were furious. "He doesn't even have a degree," Derek complained during a family dinner. Dad simply pointed at the purchase order from the client whose contract I had saved. "That's his degree," Dad replied. "Worth more than both of yours combined." One night, about a year after I joined the company, Dad called me into his office after everyone had gone home. "Garrett, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, closing the door. "The innovations you're creating, they're the future of this company." I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "In this business, ideas are everything," he continued. "And ideas need protection." He slid a business card across the desk. "This is Patricia Mendez, the best patent attorney in the state. I want you to meet with her tomorrow." "Shouldn't the company handle patents?" I asked. Dad leaned forward. "Let me give you some advice I wish someone had given me when I started. Always protect your intellectual property. Even from family. Especially from family." The next day, I met with Patricia and filed my first patent application for the wireless signal amplifier I'd designed. Dad and I had a private agreement. I would personally hold the patents for everything I created, and license them to Reynolds Electronics for a nominal fee. It was his way of ensuring I would always be valued and protected within the company. That first patent became the cornerstone of our most successful product line, which grew from a $2 million contract to over $75 million in annual revenue within a decade. As I continued to innovate, the company expanded. moving from our original warehouse to a gleaming 3-story building in the business district. My department grew from just me to a team of 15 engineers, all working to bring my designs to life. While the company prospered, Dad's health declined. In early 2020, he was diagnosed with heart disease. As his energy waned, my brothers increasingly took over day-to-day operations. I didn't mind at first. I preferred being in the lab anyway, and they were competent in their roles. But I noticed a shift in how decisions were made. More and more, I found myself being informed rather than consulted. I'll never forget the day a group of potential investors came to tour the facility. Dad, despite looking frail, insisted on leading the tour himself. When they reached my lab, he put his arm around my shoulders. "Everything you see in our catalog came from this man's mind," he told them proudly. "My son Garrett is the heart of Reynolds Electronics." Marcus and Derek exchanged glances. I recognized that look. It was the same one they'd given each other as teenagers when they thought Dad was being unfair by praising me. Some things never change, I guess. I didn't know it then. But those were the last investors Dad would ever pitch to. The company that had begun in our garage was now valued at over $120 million, employed more than 100 people, and had secured its place as an industry leader in wireless communication technology. Dad had achieved his dream, and I had helped make it possible. But as his health deteriorated, I worried about what would happen next. Not to the company, to our family. The night Dad died started like any other family dinner. Once a month, no matter how busy we all were. Dad insisted we gather at his house, the same one we grew up in, though he could have afforded something much grander. Mom had passed 5 years earlier, but Dad kept the tradition alive, hiring a local caterer to prepare her recipes. We were midway through dessert when Dad put his fork down and pressed his hand to his chest. At first, I thought he was just emotional. He'd been telling a story about the early days of the company. Then I saw the pain in his eyes. "Dad?" I said, half rising from my chair. He looked directly at me, opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he slumped forward onto the table, knocking over his water glass. What followed was chaos. Derek called 911 while Marcus and I lowered Dad to the floor. I performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, my hands shaking but determined, refusing to accept what was happening. The ambulance ride, the hospital waiting room, the doctor's grim face, it all blurred together in a nightmare of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Howard Reynolds was pronounced dead at 9:47 p.m. on October 12, 2022. The funeral was held 3 days later. The church overflowed with people whose lives Dad had touched, employees, clients, competitors who respected him. Even the janitor from our first office building. Marcus delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking at carefully timed intervals as he spoke about Dad's business acumen and family values. Derek organized the reception with military precision, making sure to speak personally with every important business contact who attended. I sat silently in the front row, unable to put my grief into words that others would understand. My father wasn't just my parent or my boss, he was my mentor, my colleague, my champion. Without him, I felt untethered. A satellite that had lost its planet. A week after the funeral, we met in the conference room at Reynolds Electronics for the reading of the will. Dad's attorney, Richard Goldstein, who had been with him since the beginning, laid it out simply. The company would be divided equally among the three of us, each receiving a 33.3% share. The remaining 0.1% would go to Richard himself, to serve as a tiebreaker in case of deadlock decisions. Your father wanted to ensure the company would continue without disruption, Richard explained, adjusting his glasses. He believed in all three of you, in your different strengths. Our first board meeting as orphans was tense. Marcus immediately nominated himself as CEO. As the oldest and the one with the most business experience, I should take Dad's position, he said, straightening his tie. Derek will serve as COO, handling sales and marketing. Garrett will continue as CTO, focusing on what he does best. I wanted to object, not because I wanted to be CEO, but because I knew what focusing on what he does best really meant. Being siloed in the lab while my brothers made all the decisions. But grief had hollowed me out, leaving no energy for conflict. I abstained from the vote, allowing Richard to cast the deciding vote in favor of Marcus's proposal. Within weeks, the power shift became apparent. Executive meetings were scheduled when I was busy with technical deadlines. New business initiatives were launched without my input. My department's budget requests were scrutinized and cut, while sales and marketing received increased funding. One afternoon, I was heading to the break room when I overheard Marcus and Derek in Marcus's office, door slightly ajar. Dad always treated him like the golden child, Marcus was saying. Like Garrett was some kind of genius who needed to be protected. Dad's pet project, Derek agreed with a laugh. But we're running things now, and we need to focus on business. Not endless R&D that might never pay off. I froze, coffee mug in hand, as Marcus continued. The investors are getting antsy about the innovation pipeline. We need to show them something new at next quarter's presentation. What about Garrett's new signal processing system? Derek asked. Perfect. Put together some slides. We'll present it as a company-wide development effort. I walked away before they could notice me, my coffee forgotten. That evening, I pulled up the files on the signal processing system they'd mentioned, my latest project, which I'd been working on nights and weekends for months. It wasn't just another incremental improvement. It was a breakthrough that would increase data transmission speeds by 40% while reducing power consumption. And they were planning to present it without even consulting me. This pattern continued over the following months. Reynolds Electronics had 5 main product lines by then: wireless amplifiers, signal processors, network security hardware, data storage systems, and diagnostic tools. All of them utilized my patented technologies in some way. All of them were being marketed and sold without acknowledging the source of their innovation. I decided it was time to get clarity on my position. I contacted Richard Goldstein and asked for a confidential meeting away from the office. How exactly are the patents structured? I asked him over lunch at a restaurant 20 miles from our headquarters. Richard pulled out a folder. Your father was very specific about this. The patents are registered to you personally, with an exclusive licensing agreement to Reynolds Electronics that can be terminated under certain conditions. He pushed his glasses up his nose. One of those conditions is if you are removed from your position without cause. So the company doesn't own the technology? No, Garrett. You do. I sat back, processing this information. But a document had fallen behind a potted plant in the corner. It was a single page from what appeared to be a merger presentation, with the logo of Westfield Technologies, our largest competitor, in the header. One bullet point stood out. Streamline technical operations post-acquisition. In corporate speak, streamline almost always means fire people. That afternoon, I installed the recording app on my office phone, completely legal in our state as long as one party knows the conversation is being recorded. I then scheduled a conference call with our patent attorney, making sure to route it through my office line. When my brothers saw this on my calendar, they did exactly what I expected. They used my phone to discuss the situation while I was in the lab. I played back the recording that evening. Westfield is only interested if we can guarantee uninterrupted product development, Marcus was saying. What about the tech geek? Asked Derek. He's expendable. Their CTO has already reviewed our product line and believes they can continue development without him. Good. I'm tired of treating him like he's irreplaceable just because Dad thought he was some kind of prodigy. The board meeting is set for Friday. We'll present it as a restructuring. Get Richard's vote with the golden parachute we discussed, and finally get rid of little brother. I sat at my desk, the recording playing on loop, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just business, this was personal. They weren't just dismissing my role, they were erasing my contribution to everything our father had built. The next day, I contacted Patricia Mendez, the patent attorney Dad had originally introduced me to. We met at her office after hours. I need to understand exactly what my options are, I explained, sliding a folder across her desk. It contained documentation for all 23 patents that formed the backbone of Reynolds Electronics' product line. Patricia reviewed the documents carefully. These are very strong patents, Garrett. And the licensing agreement with Reynolds Electronics is indeed contingent on your continued employment in a technical leadership capacity. She looked up at me. Are you expecting that to change? Yes, I said simply. And I need to know what happens next. Legally, if they remove you from your position, you can terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days' notice. Without those licenses, they cannot legally manufacture, sell, or distribute any product that utilizes your patented technology. Which is virtually everything they make. I confirmed. Exactly. They would have to cease operations immediately or face significant legal penalties, up to $150,000 per infringement instance. And if they're in the process of being acquired? Patricia smiled grimly. That would likely kill the deal. No company would acquire a business that suddenly lost the legal right to produce its own products. I spent the next few days in a fog of emotion, anger, betrayal, sadness, and occasionally, when I allowed myself to think about what I might do, a small spark of satisfaction. I'd given 12 years of my life to Reynolds Electronics. I'd skipped college to help build it. I'd worked weekends and holidays when everyone else was enjoying their lives. And my reward was being plotted against by my own brothers, who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their ambitions. Every night that week, I added to my secure offsite backup, not just technical documentation now, but emails, meeting notes, financial projections showing the revenue generated by my innovations. I contacted 3 of my most trusted engineers who had been with me the longest and subtly asked about their future plans, gauging their loyalty. All 3 expressed frustration with the current management and hinted they would follow me if an opportunity arose. On Thursday night, the evening before the scheduled board meeting, I sat alone in my apartment surrounded by 12 years of work, the legacy of my father spread out on paper before me. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, Dad and me at the company's 10th anniversary celebration, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. What would you do, Dad? I whispered to the image. But I already knew the answer. Always protect your intellectual property. Especially from family. I made my decision. I would not go quietly. I would not allow my brothers to erase me from the company our father built. I would use the protection Dad had wisely put in place years ago. I would stand up for myself, finally. I spent the rest of the night preparing, a strange sense of calm replacing the turmoil of the past days. By dawn, I had a plan. I dressed carefully for the board meeting in my best suit, not that it would matter, but it would be the last image they had of me at Reynolds Electronics, and I wanted it to be one of dignity. Friday arrived with the artificial cheerfulness of a corporate execution. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m., late enough in the day that most employees would be focusing on their weekend plans rather than company politics. I arrived early, nodding to familiar faces, knowing it might be the last time I walked these halls as CTO. The conference room was arranged like a tribunal, Marcus and Derek at the head of the table, Richard Goldstein to their right, and Janet Whitman, our major investor, to their left. A single chair sat opposite them, clearly meant for me. Behind my brother stood Melissa from HR, clutching a folder I assumed contained my severance papers. "Garrett, right on time," Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, straightened my tie, and waited. Derek clicked a remote, and the projection screen descended from the ceiling. The title slide read, Strategic Restructuring for Growth Initiative. As you all know, Marcus began, addressing the small board, Reynolds Electronics is at a critical juncture. To continue our growth trajectory and maximize shareholder value, we need to evolve our operational structure. What followed was 20 minutes of corporate doublespeak, charts showing projections with mysteriously increasing profits despite no new product innovations, and vague references to streamlining technical operations and consolidating leadership functions. Finally, Marcus reached the point. Therefore, we propose eliminating the Chief Technology Officer position and redistributing its functions among the existing executive team and our newly expanded engineering department. Janet Whitman frowned. And what happens to Garrett in this restructuring? Derek jumped in smoothly. We recognize Garrett's historical contribution to Reynolds Electronics and are prepared to offer a generous severance package, including 6 months' salary and benefits. I see, said Janet, glancing at me with what might have been sympathy. Marcus cleared his throat. We need to put this to a vote. All in favor of accepting the restructuring plan as presented? Marcus and Derek raised their hands immediately. After a moment's hesitation, Richard Goldstein raised his as well, avoiding my gaze. That's 3 votes in favor, Marcus announced. Janet? The investor sighed. I'll abstain. This seems like a family matter. Noted. Garrett, would you like to register your vote for the record? I looked at each of them in turn, my brothers, who couldn't hide their triumph, Richard, who couldn't meet my eyes, Janet, who seemed genuinely uncomfortable. My vote wouldn't change the outcome, I said quietly. But for the record, I vote against. Duly noted, Marcus said. The motion passes, 3-1 with 1 abstention. He turned to me with that same insincere smile. Garrett, we want to thank you for your years of service. Melissa has your paperwork. Derek leaned forward, his expression a mockery of concern. We know this must be difficult, but we believe it's best for the company moving forward. We'd like to offer you a small consulting role, 10 hours a month at a competitive rate, to help with the transition. I almost laughed at the insult disguised as generosity. 10 hours a month, when I had been working 70-hour weeks for years. That won't be necessary, I replied. Well then, Marcus said, standing to signal the end of the meeting. Melissa will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. We've arranged for security to help you to your car. Security. As if I might steal something or cause a scene. I, who had designed the security system that protected the building. I stood and buttoned my jacket. Is there anything else? For a moment, my brothers looked confused by my calm. They had expected tears, protests, perhaps even begging. Instead, they got quiet dignity. No, that's all, Marcus finally said. We'll have your final paycheck processed by next Friday. I nodded once and followed Melissa out of the conference room. Through the glass wall, I could see Derek already opening a bottle of champagne, Marcus clapping him on the back. My office, the space where I had created innovations worth millions, took less than 30 minutes to pack up. Family photos, technical books, a few awards, and personal notebooks filled just 2 cardboard boxes. The company laptop and phone remained on the desk, wiped clean of personal data the night before. Jake from security stood awkwardly by the door, a young man who had always greeted me warmly each morning. I'm really sorry about this, Mr. Reynolds, he whispered as he escorted me to the elevator. Not your fault, Jake, I assured him. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my brothers through the glass walls of the conference room, laughing and raising champagne flutes, celebrating their victory. The walk through the parking garage was silent except for the echo of our footsteps. Jake helped load my boxes into the trunk of my car, then stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with his assigned role. Take care of yourself, Mr. Reynolds, he said. I got into my car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Through my rearview mirror, I watched Jake return to the building, shoulders slumped. Only then did I allow myself a small smile. They thought they had won. They thought it was over. It was only just beginning. As I drove away from Reynolds Electronics for what I thought might be the last time, my phone rang. It was Janet Whitman, the investor who had abstained from the vote. "Garrett," she said without preamble. "Are you really gone?" "Yes," I replied. "Effective immediately." There was a pause then. "That was a mistake on their part." "A big one." "Perhaps," I said noncommittally. "I know your father valued your contribution highly," she continued. "Much more than your brother seemed to. Dad understood what drives this company." I agreed. "Well," Janet said carefully, "I hope this isn't the last we see of you, Garrett Reynolds." "I can promise you it's not," I replied, and ended the call. The weekend stretched before me, the first in years without work obligations, emails to answer, or projects to complete. I should have felt lost. Instead, I felt focused, determined, and strangely free. The time for grief and shock had passed. Now it was time for action. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I allowed myself 1 hour to feel everything: anger at my brother's betrayal, sadness at how far we had fallen from Dad's vision, fear about an uncertain future. I wrote it all down, every raw emotion. Then burned the paper in my kitchen sink. Catharsis complete, it was time to work. I called Patricia Mendez, who agreed to meet me at her office despite it being the weekend. "I've been expecting your call," she said when I arrived. "I assume the situation has escalated?" "I've been removed from my position," I confirmed. "Effective yesterday." She nodded grimly. "Then we need to move quickly. The licensing agreement gives you the right to terminate with 30 days' notice upon involuntary removal from your position. Once notice is given, they must cease and desist from using your patented technologies immediately or face penalties for willful infringement." "What kind of penalties are we talking about?" "Up to $150,000 per instance of infringement. Given their product volume, that could amount to millions in a single day of continued operation." I took a deep breath. "I want to form a new company. Reynolds Innovation Labs." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious. And your brothers will certainly object to the use of the Reynolds name." "The name isn't trademarked," I countered. "And I'm as much a Reynolds as they are." We spent the next 3 hours going through each patent, documenting exactly how it was implemented in Reynolds Electronics' current product lines. The results were staggering. 98% of the company's revenue came from products that directly utilized my patented technologies. Without those licenses, the company would essentially have to shut down until they developed non-infringing alternatives, a process that would take years, not months. "What's your ultimate goal here, Garrett?" Patricia asked as we reviewed the final numbers. "Do you want to destroy your father's company?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "No," I said after a moment. "I want what Dad would have wanted: recognition for my contribution and a fair stake in the company's future. If my brothers had treated me with respect, we wouldn't be here." Patricia nodded. "Then perhaps we should consider a negotiation strategy as well as legal action. What would it take for you to license the patents to them under new terms?" I thought about it. "Full reinstatement as CTO with expanded authority, a seat on the board that can't be removed without unanimous consent, and proper credit for my innovations going forward. And if they refuse? Then I'll license the technologies to their competitors or develop them myself through Reynolds Innovation Labs." By Sunday afternoon, I had contacted the 3 loyal engineers from my team who had also been terminated in the restructuring. All 3 immediately agreed to join my new venture. Energized by the prospect of working in an environment that valued innovation, I secured a small office space in a building across town, nothing fancy, but functional for our immediate needs. Monday morning, I met with Patricia and her team to draft the cease and desist letters, one for each product line, meticulously documenting the patent infringements. The letters were clear. Reynolds Electronics had 30 days to negotiate new licensing terms or cease all production, sales, and distribution of infringing products. These will be delivered by courier tomorrow morning, Patricia confirmed. Are you sure you're ready for this, Garrett? Once these letters are delivered, there's no going back. I thought of my brother Champagne's celebration. Their dismissive treatment of my work, their betrayal of our father's legacy. I'm sure, I said. But I'd like to request something special. What's that? I want the courier to arrive at 9 a.m. sharp, when the entire executive team has their weekly status meeting. Patricia smiled. That can be arranged. That evening I sat in my new, nearly empty office space, staring at the Reynolds Electronics building visible through the window several blocks away. Tomorrow would change everything. I should have felt nervous, but instead, I felt a strange calm. Dad had prepared me for this moment years ago, though either of us had hoped it would come. I took out my phone and pulled up a photo of him, not the professional headshot from the company website, but a candid shot from a family vacation, his eyes crinkling with laughter. I wish you were here to see this, Dad, I whispered. But I think you knew this day might come. That's why you made sure I'd be ready. I slept surprisingly well that night. Better than I had in months. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a crisp suit, made coffee in my new office, and waited. At exactly 9 a.m., I received a text from the courier service. Packages delivered. Then I waited. The first call came at 9:17 a.m., Marcus's number flashing on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 9:18 a.m., Derek this time. Then Marcus again. Then the company's general counsel. Within 30 minutes, I had 12 missed calls and 7 increasingly frantic voicemails. Garrett, this is Marcus. Call me immediately. There's been some kind of mistake. Garrett, Derek here. We need to talk about these ridiculous letters. Call me back now. Garrett, Marcus again. This isn't funny. You can't just shut down the company. Call me back or I'll have to take legal action. Garrett, this is Richard Goldstein. Please call me to discuss the patent situation. I'm sure we can work something out. Garrett, Derek. Listen, maybe we were hasty on Friday. Let's discuss your role at the company. Call me. Garrett, Marcus. The board is meeting in an hour. We need to hear from you before then. This is serious. Garrett, it's Janet Whitman. I need to speak with you urgently about the future of Reynolds Electronics. Please call me as soon as possible. At 11 a.m., my phone rang again, this time showing Patricia's number. They've called an emergency board meeting, she reported. Their general counsel has confirmed the validity of your patent claims. Production has been halted to avoid further liability. They're requesting a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. Tell them I'm available tomorrow at 2 p.m. At your office, not theirs. And until then? Until then, I'm busy setting up my new company. The next 24 hours unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Reynolds Electronics stock price dropped 17% as news of the production shutdown leaked to key investors. 3 major clients called to express concern about pending orders. The company's PR team issued a vague statement about temporary production adjustments. That fooled no one. By the time 2 p.m. Tuesday arrived, I was perfectly calm, seated in Patricia's conference room reviewing our strategy one final time. My brothers, by contrast, looked like they hadn't slept. Marcus's typically immaculate suit was wrinkled, and Derek's usual confident smile was nowhere to be seen. They were accompanied by the company's general counsel, Edward Chen, and Richard Goldstein, who still couldn't quite meet my eyes. Thank you for meeting with us, Garrett, Marcus began, his voice lacking its usual authority. We believe there's been a serious misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied evenly. The patents are registered to me personally. The licensing agreement clearly states that the licenses terminate if I'm removed from my position without cause. You removed me, so the licenses terminate. It's quite straightforward. But you can't just shut down the company, Derek interjected. It's Dad's legacy. A legacy you were happy to push me out of on Friday. I reminded him. With champagne, if I recall correctly. Edwardson cleared his throat. Mr. Reynolds, while the patent situation is complicated, surely we can reach an agreement that benefits all parties. Reynolds Electronics employs over 100 people who had nothing to do with your disagreement with your brothers. I'm well aware of that, I said. Which is why I'm willing to negotiate new terms. What terms? Marcus asked warily. Patricia slid a document across the table. Mr. Reynolds is prepared to offer two options. Marcus picked up the paper, scanned it, and his face paled. This is extortion. It's negotiation. Patricia corrected. Option 1. Reynolds Electronics purchases all patents outright for fair market value, estimated at $40 million based on current and projected revenue streams. $40 million? Derek exclaimed. That's ridiculous. Option 2. Patricia continued as if he hadn't spoken. Mr. Reynolds returns as CEO with Mr. Marcus Reynolds and Mr. Derek Reynolds remaining in executive roles with reduced authority. All patents will be licensed to the company under a new agreement that cannot be terminated except by mutual consent. CEO? Marcus sputtered. That's never going to happen. The board would never approve it. The board won't have much choice. I pointed out. Without those licenses, Reynolds Electronics has no products to sell. No products means no revenue. No revenue means no company. No company means no jobs, including yours. Derek leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. This is a betrayal of everything Dad built. He would be ashamed of you. That stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Dad built a company that valued innovation and treated people with respect. He would be ashamed of how quickly you forgot that once he was gone. There must be another solution. Edwardson interjected. Perhaps we could challenge the patent assignments. Patricia shook her head. The assignments were properly executed and registered. Mr. Howard Reynolds himself signed off on each one. They would withstand any legal challenge. What about a third option? Richard finally spoke up. Perhaps Garrett could return as CTO with expanded authority and a board seat. That was an option on Friday. I replied. Not anymore. The meeting continued for another hour, with my brothers cycling through anger, disbelief, desperate bargaining, and finally, grim acceptance that their position was untenable. They had no leverage, no alternatives, and time was not on their side. Every day the company remained unable to ship products cost them millions in revenue and eroded client confidence. We need time to consider these options, Marcus finally said. You have 48 hours, I replied. After that, I'll begin discussions with Westfield Technologies about licensing these patents to them instead. The mention of Westfield, the very company they had been planning to sell to, hit home. Derek's face actually went pale. You wouldn't, he whispered. 48 hours, I repeated, standing to signal the end of the meeting. I suggest you use them wisely. As they filed out, Richard Goldstein hung back. Your father would be proud of how you've handled this, Garrett, he said quietly. He always said you were the smartest of his sons. I wasn't sure if that was true, but it was nice to hear nonetheless. The next morning dawned with a strange sense of anticipation. I arrived at my small office to find my 3 engineers already hard at work, setting up equipment and reviewing the projects we would pursue as Reynolds Innovation Labs. Their enthusiasm was infectious, for the first time in years. They were working in an environment where technical innovation was valued above all else. At precisely 9 a.m., my phone rang. Janet Whitman. Garrett, I understand you met with your brothers yesterday, she said without preamble. Yes, I confirmed. We discussed options for resolving the patent situation. I'm calling as an investor concerned about the future of Reynolds Electronics. The company has halted all production. Clients are getting nervous. Stock price is falling. This situation needs resolution. I agree, I said. I've presented two very clear options. A $40 million buyout or you taking over as CEO, she stated. Those are steep terms. Fair terms, given the circumstances. Janet was silent for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm not opposed to the second option. Your brothers are good at what they do, but the company needs technical leadership to move forward. It always has. I appreciate your support, I said. But the decision isn't yours to make. No, but my opinion carries weight with the board. Just something to consider. After we hung up, I received a text from Patricia. Security footage from our lobby shows quite a scene this morning. Uploading to your secure folder now. I opened my laptop and clicked on the video file she had sent. The footage showed the main entrance to Reynolds Electronics, timestamped 8:45 a.m. Marcus and Derek arrived simultaneously, looking grim. As they walked through the security gates, an employee approached them with several papers in hand. From his gestures, he appeared to be asking about the production shutdown. Marcus brushed past him without answering. But more employees gathered, their body language showing increasing agitation. Derek attempted to address the group but was interrupted repeatedly. Finally, both brothers retreated to the executive elevator, faces tense. The pressure was building, exactly as I had anticipated. Reynolds Electronics employed over 100 people, all of whom would be wondering why production had suddenly halted and what it meant for their jobs. Throughout the day, the calls continued, from Marcus, from Derek, from various board members, and even from longtime clients concerned about pending orders. I let most go to voicemail, responding only to Janet Whitman and Richard Goldstein with brief, non-committal messages that I was still awaiting my brother's decision. At 4:30 p.m., exactly 43.5 hours into their 48-hour deadline, I received a text from Marcus. Emergency board meeting called for 6 p.m. Your presence requested. I replied simply, I'll be there. Reynolds Electronics looked different as I approached it that evening, quieter, almost subdued. As if the building itself sensed the impending change. Jake the security guard nodded respectfully as I entered, no longer treating me as an outsider to be watched. The boardroom was full when I arrived. Marcus and Derek sat at the head of the table, flanked by Richard Goldstein, Janet Whitman, and several other minor investors. Edward Chin stood by the whiteboard, looking grave. Garrett, Marcus acknowledged me with a nod. Thank you for coming. I took the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. I understand you've reached a decision. Marcus glanced at Derek, who gave a slight nod. We have. After careful consideration of all options, and in the best interest of Reynolds Electronics and its employees, we are prepared to accept your second option, with some modifications. I raised an eyebrow. What modifications? You would return as CEO, with full authority over company operations. Derek and I would remain as Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Financial Officer, respectively, reporting to you. All patents would be licensed to the company under a new agreement, as you proposed. And the modifications? I prompted. Marcus cleared his throat. We request a 3-year employment guarantee for both of us, with mutually agreed upon performance metrics. And we would like Richard to retain his 0.1% stake to serve as a neutral third party in case of disagreements. I considered this. The terms were reasonable, better than I had expected, actually. They were conceding full control while trying to secure their own positions, which was understandable. I can agree to those terms, I said, with one addition of my own. Public acknowledgement of my role in developing the company's technology. Past, present, and future. Derek's jaw tightened, but Marcus nodded. Agreed. Edward Chin stepped forward with a document. We've prepared a preliminary agreement based on these terms. It would take effect immediately upon signing, subject to formal contracts to be drawn up by both parties' attorneys. I accepted the document and read it carefully. It was straightforward. I would be installed as CEO effective immediately, with Marcus and Derek remaining in executive roles reporting directly to me. All patent licenses would be reinstated under a new agreement that could not be terminated without mutual consent. My brothers would receive employment guarantees with performance requirements. And there would be a public statement acknowledging my role in the company's technological development. One question before I sign, I said, looking directly at my brothers. Why? Why did you try to push me out in the first place? The room fell silent. Marcus and Derek exchanged uncomfortable glances. We thought we could do better without you, Marcus finally admitted. We saw you as an expense. A department that consumed resources without understanding business realities. We were wrong, Derek added quietly. We didn't realize how central your work was to everything we do. Dad knew, I said. That's why he protected me, and the company, by structuring the patents the way he did. Dad was smarter than we gave him credit for. Marcus acknowledged with a rueful smile. I signed the agreement. Production can resume immediately. I'll have my attorney draft the formal licensing agreement tomorrow. As the meeting broke up, Janet Whitman approached me. Congratulations, CEO Reynolds, she said with a smile. I look forward to seeing where you take the company. Back to its roots, I replied. Innovation first, business second. It's what Dad would have wanted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The formal contracts were drawn up and signed. Production resumed. A press release announced my appointment as CEO and highlighted my history of innovation at the company. Clients were reassured, employees were relieved, and the stock price began to recover. My brothers, to their credit, adapted to the new reality with surprising grace. Marcus's financial acumen was still valuable, and Derek's marketing skills were undeniable. They just needed to recognize that without innovation, without my contribution, they had nothing to sell, no matter how good their spreadsheets or advertising campaigns were. The first executive meeting under my leadership was tense but productive. I outlined a new direction for Reynolds Electronics, one that put research and development at the forefront, while still respecting the business and marketing expertise that had helped the company grow. We all have our strengths, I told the team. Dad built this company on the principle that technology and business should work hand in hand, not in opposition. We lost sight of that for a while. But we're getting back on track. As the weeks turned into months, the company began to thrive again. My expanded R&D department launched 2 new product lines that immediately captured market share. Revenue increased by 22% in the first quarter under my leadership. Even my brothers had to admit that the new direction was working. 1 year after the showdown that changed everything. We held a company-wide celebration to mark the launch of our most ambitious product yet, a revolutionary data security system that would position Reynolds Electronics as an industry leader for years to come. During the event, Marcus approached me, champagne glass in hand, a different kind of celebration than the one that had marked my departure a year earlier. I need to say something, he began, looking uncomfortable but determined. Derek and I were wrong about you. We were wrong about a lot of things. Water under the bridge, I assured him. No, it needs to be said. We forgot what made this company special in the first place. Dad knew it was your innovations. We were just too proud to see it. Derek joined us, nodding in agreement. The company's doing better than ever under your leadership, Garrett. Dad would be proud. For the first time since his death, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were becoming the family Dad had always wanted us to be, different but complementary, each contributing our unique strengths to something larger than ourselves. To Dad, I said, raising my glass. To Dad, my brothers echoed. And somewhere, I like to think Howard Reynolds was smiling. It's been 3 years since that pivotal board meeting that changed everything at Reynolds Electronics. The transition wasn't always smooth, change rarely is, but the results speak for themselves. Our company valuation has tripled. Our workforce has grown from 100 to nearly 300 employees. And most importantly, we've recaptured the spirit of innovation that my father valued above all else. The journey from being kicked out to taking over as CEO taught me lessons I never expected to learn, especially about family dynamics in business. My brothers and I reached our final agreement after 2 weeks of intense negotiation. I accepted the role of CEO with the understanding that they would remain as CFO and CMO, but with clear boundaries and expectations. Marcus initially struggled with the loss of authority, but eventually found his groove focusing exclusively on financial strategy. Derek actually thrived in his more defined role, freed from executive decisions to concentrate on what he does best, marketing our innovations to the world. The board supported the transition, recognizing that the patent situation left them little choice. Janet Whitman became my strongest ally, often reminding others that this arrangement reflects what Howard always intended. Our first year was the hardest. Old habits die hard, and my brothers occasionally slipped into their former dismissive attitudes toward technical considerations. Each time, I had to reassert boundaries firmly but respectfully. We established a new decision-making process that required sign-off from all three of us for major company initiatives, ensuring that technology, finance, and marketing all had equal voices. "I don't need to understand every circuit diagram," Marcus admitted during one particularly productive meeting. "I just need to trust that you do." That was progress. By year 2, we had settled into a surprisingly effective leadership triad. Marcus's financial discipline, Derek's marketing brilliance, and my technological innovations complemented each other in ways I hadn't anticipated. We weren't just coexisting, we were actually collaborating better than we ever had before. The turning point in our personal relationship came during the launch of our quantum encryption product line, a breakthrough that put us years ahead of our competitors. At the press conference, a reporter asked who was responsible for the innovation. "That would be our CEO, my brother Garrett," Derek said without hesitation. "He's the genius in the family." I almost dropped my water glass in shock. Later, when I thanked him for the acknowledgement, Derek shrugged. "It's just the truth," he said. "Dad always knew it. Took us longer to see it." Perhaps the most satisfying moment came during our annual shareholder meeting last quarter. As we presented our financial results, the best in company history, Marcus actually stepped back from the podium and said, "These numbers tell a story of what happens when you put innovation first." My brother Garrett taught us that lesson, sometimes the hard way. There was laughter from the audience, but also nodding heads. Everyone knew the story by now, how I'd been pushed out, how I'd held all the patents, how I'd returned to lead the company to new heights. Our father built Reynolds Electronics on the principle that technical innovation should drive business decisions, not the other way around. In his absence, we had lost sight of that truth. My brothers saw the technical department as a cost center rather than the company's heart. I saw business and marketing as necessary evils rather than essential partners. We were all wrong. Dad's wisdom in having me hold the patents personally wasn't about creating leverage or preparing for conflict. It was about ensuring that innovation would always have a seat at the table, that the technical vision that drove the company's success would never be sidelined by short-term business thinking. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't had that protection, if my brothers had been able to push me out without consequences. Reynolds Electronics might still exist, but it wouldn't be the industry leader it is today. It wouldn't be fulfilling my father's vision. The lessons I learned through this experience have shaped not just my business approach but my personal philosophy. First, preparation matters more than confrontation. Dad's foresight in protecting my intellectual property gave me options when I needed them most. I didn't have to fight, I just had to stand my ground. Second, Real power comes from creating value that others can't replicate. My brothers initially thought their business and marketing skills were the company's core value. They learned that without innovation, without me, they had nothing unique to sell. Third, family businesses need clearer boundaries, not fewer. We operate better now with well-defined roles and explicit decision-making processes than we ever did with informal, brother, relationships in the workplace. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean destroying relationships. My brothers and I have actually grown closer through this restructuring, our personal relationships improving as our professional roles clarified. Last month, on what would have been Dad's 75th birthday, the three of us gathered at his grave with a bottle of his favorite scotch. We took turns sharing memories and pouring small libations onto the earth. When it was my turn, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. "You were right, Dad," I said quietly. "About everything. About protecting innovation. About the patents. About us needing each other, even when we couldn't see it." Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. He knew we'd figure it out eventually. Just didn't know how dramatic the process would be. Derek laughed. "What do you expect? We're Reynolds men. We don't do anything halfway." As we stood there, three brothers united again, I thought about how close we had come to destroying everything our father built, not just the company, but our family. Instead, we found a way forward that honored his legacy while creating something new and better. Reynolds Electronics isn't just my father's company anymore. It's ours, all three of us contributing our unique strengths to a whole greater than its parts. Just as he always intended. So what's your story? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when others undervalued your contribution? Did it lead to destruction or, like in our case, to something stronger in the end? Drop a comment below and let me know. And if you found this story helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life business lessons. Share this with someone who might need the courage to stand their ground when it matters most. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage.